On a quiet night, an elderly black woman stood firm with a baseball bat as two intruders shattered her window, unaware her grandson was the town's chief of police. What followed wasn't just a foiled break-in. It ignited a battle exposing the deep divisions of a fractured community. What happened next would shock even those who thought they'd seen it all. But let's start at the beginning. Martha Williams was more than just an elderly woman to her neighbors. She was a cherished symbol of the town's spirit and history. At 82, her presence still carried a quiet dignity, her every gesture a reminder of her years as a dedicated teacher. Generations of children had grown up under her patient guidance, and even now, adults she once taught often sought her advice on life's challenges. Her wiry frame moved slower these days, her cane tapping a gentle rhythm against the sidewalk. But her sharp mind and kind heart remained untouched by age. On a particularly sunny afternoon, Martha decided to visit the farmer's market, her favorite weekend ritual. Dressed in a light floral dress and a wide-brimmed hat, she exuded an air of timeless grace. Around her neck, a string of pearls, her late husband's last gift to her, rested delicately, a symbol of the strength and love that had carried her through life. She walked confidently, the sweet smell of fresh produce and the cheerful hum of the market filling the air. As she moved between the colorful stalls, inspecting ripe tomatoes and fragrant herbs, Martha felt a faint chill. She glanced over her shoulder and noticed two men lingering at the edge of the crowd. Their shabby clothes and darting eyes contrasted sharply with the relaxed atmosphere of the market. They whispered to each other, their laughter sharp and mocking. Martha instinctively clutched her purse closer, her fingers tightening around the leather strap. She continued browsing, unwilling to let unease ruin her outing, but her mind was racing. The men followed at a distance, one pretending to peruse a fruit stand, while the other moved closer. Martha's heartbeat quickened. She had faced adversity before, losing her husband, raising her grandson, and navigating a world that often underestimated her. But this felt different. A primal instinct warned her that trouble was near. "Excuse me, ma'am. Mind if I help you with those?" one of the men said, his voice syrupy and insincere. He was tall and wiry, with a smirk that never reached his eyes. The second man, shorter and stockier, flanked her silently, his gaze fixed on her handbag. Martha stopped in her tracks, her knuckles white against her cane. "I don't need help," she said firmly, her voice steady despite her fear. "What do you want?" The tall man chuckled, leaning closer. "We just want to talk, Granny. No need to get upset." His hand edged toward her bag. Martha locked eyes with him, summoning every ounce of the strength that had seen her through decades of trials. "Back off," she said, her voice a quiet command. Before the men could react, another voice pierced the tension. "What's going on here?" It was Jamie, a young vendor who often helped Martha carry her purchases. His broad shoulders and confident stride carried him swiftly to her side. The men froze, their bravado faltering as Jamie's sharp eyes assessed the situation. "Just a misunderstanding," one of them muttered, backing away. The other laughed nervously, and within moments, they disappeared into the crowd. Jamie turned to Martha, his face etched with concern. "You all right, Mrs. Williams?" She nodded, managing a faint smile. "I am now, Jamie. Thank you." Though she thanked him and hurried home, the encounter lingered in her mind, a sour note in an otherwise peaceful day. She didn't know then that this would be more than a passing incident, that this brush with danger would set off a chain of events that would ripple through the town and her family in ways she could never have imagined. David Carter, chief of police, was deep into a stack of paperwork at the station when his phone vibrated against the desk. Glancing at the screen, he saw a text from Jamie, one of the local market vendors. As he read the message, a cold wave of dread washed over him. His grandmother, Martha, the woman who had not only raised him, but shaped him into the man he was, had nearly been mugged, and in broad daylight. The image of her, vulnerable and frightened, ignited a storm of emotions: fear, anger, and a fierce need to protect. Without wasting a second, David grabbed his phone and dialed her number. "Grandma, are you okay? What happened?" he asked, his voice taut with worry. On the other end, Martha's voice was calm, but David could hear the tremor beneath her words. "I'm fine, David. Just some boys with no manners. Jamie scared them off. There's no need to fuss." But her attempt to downplay the situation didn't fool him. David knew his grandmother too well. That slight quiver in her voice was enough to tell him she was shaken, no matter how bravely she tried to hide it. "Grandma, this isn't nothing. I'll take care of it," he said firmly. After ensuring she was safely home, David sprang into action. Logging into the town's surveillance system, he pulled up footage from the market. He fast-forwarded through the morning's recording until he spotted Martha, her floral dress standing out in the crowd. The camera captured everything: the two men following her, their predatory glances, the moment Jamie stepped in, and their hasty retreat. David froze the frame on their faces and cursed under his breath. He recognized one of them immediately: Tim Harper, a small-time criminal with a growing rap sheet of petty thefts and burglaries. The other man was unfamiliar, but looked just as shady. David's jaw clenched as he grabbed his radio. "Get the team ready," he barked. "We've got a pair of troublemakers to pick up, and make sure Harper's mugshot is on the board. Nobody messes with my family." While David strategized, unaware of the long night ahead, the two men were regrouping. Emboldened by their earlier attempt, they mistook Martha's quiet demeanor for weakness. They met in a dingy alley a few blocks from the market, sharing a flask, as they hashed out a plan. "That old lady's got something," Tim said, his voice slurred with arrogance. "She's got that pearl necklace and who knows what else stashed at her house. And there ain't no big guy around to stop us there." His partner nodded, a crooked grin spreading across his face. "She won't even see us coming. We hit her place tonight, quiet and quick." As the sun set, they parked their rusty sedan a block away from Martha's house. The quiet residential street was lined with tidy lawns and glowing porch lights. The soft hum of crickets filled the air as they crept toward the modest home. Martha, however, wasn't as oblivious as they assumed. She had grown up in a time when self-reliance was paramount, and her instincts, honed over decades, told her something was wrong. After the market incident, she had double-checked her locks and kept her porch light burning bright. Though she tried to go about her evening as usual, a nagging sense of unease kept her on edge. As she sat by the window, knitting in her favorite armchair, she noticed shadows moving in her front yard. Her heart skipped a beat. Reaching for her phone, she called the one person she trusted most. "David," she whispered when he answered. "I think they're here." David's blood ran cold, but his training kicked in immediately. "Stay calm, Grandma. Lock yourself in your bedroom and don't come out until I get there. We're on our way." The men approached the side of the house, their flashlights flickering as they tested a window. One quietly removed a crowbar from his jacket. They were moments away from forcing their way in when the silence shattered. The wail of sirens echoed down the street, and red and blue lights lit up the yard like fireworks. The men froze, their panicked faces illuminated by the patrol cars screeching to a halt in front of the house. David's booming voice rang out from a loudspeaker. "This is Chief Carter. Drop what you're holding and put your hands in the air." The would-be burglars scrambled to escape, but David's team was already surrounding them. Officers tackled the men before they could make it out of the yard, slapping cuffs on their wrists as they yelled protests. David stepped out of his car, his face a mixture of relief and fury. He approached the house, his heart pounding as he knocked on the door. Martha opened it cautiously, her eyes wide with worry. "It's over," David said, pulling her into a protective embrace. "They won't bother you again." But as David looked over his shoulder at the two men being hauled into the squad cars, he knew this was more than just a close call. It was a wake-up call, and one he wouldn't ignore. Martha Williams sat in her cozy living room, the rhythmic clicking of her knitting needles, the only sound breaking the silence of the evening. She had double-checked every lock on the doors and windows after the unsettling events of the day, but a sense of unease lingered. The shadows cast by the flickering streetlight outside seemed to stretch and shift unnaturally. A faint crunch of gravel reached her ears, and her heart jumped. She froze, her eyes darting to the window. There, just beyond the curtain, was movement. Her pulse quickened. She placed her knitting aside, stood as quietly as her creaking joints allowed, and reached for her phone. "David," she whispered when he picked up on the first ring. "I think they're here." David Carter, already at the station, was prepared. "Hold tight, Grandma. Lock yourself in your room and don't make a sound. We're on our way." But Martha wasn't the type to retreat. She hung up, locked the door to her bedroom as a precaution, and grabbed the baseball bat David had left with her years ago, just in case. Holding it firmly, she took her place near the center of the room, her eyes fixed on the living room window. The sound of shattering glass broke the night's stillness. Martha flinched, but remained rooted in place. A flashlight beam swept through the room, bouncing off family photos and the polished wood of her furniture. The intruders, emboldened by the quiet, climbed through the broken window, their laughter low and menacing. "Get out of my house." Martha's voice cut through the darkness, her tone commanding and steady, despite the rush of adrenaline coursing through her. The men froze, momentarily shocked by the sight of the petite elderly woman wielding a bat with unmistakable determination. "We don't want any trouble, Granny," one of them muttered, inching forward. But before he could take another step, a sound shattered their confidence, the wail of police sirens rapidly approaching. Red and blue lights flooded the room as patrol cars screeched to a halt outside. A booming voice echoed through a loudspeaker. "This is Chief Carter. You're surrounded. Come out with your hands up." The men exchanged panicked glances, their bravado evaporating. Realizing they had no way out, they stumbled toward the door, raising their hands. Officers swarmed them as soon as they stepped onto the porch, handcuffing them with practiced efficiency. Inside, Martha lowered the bat, her knuckles white from the grip. She exhaled shakily as the adrenaline began to subside. Moments later, the front door opened, and David rushed in, his face tight with worry. "Grandma," he called, spotting her near the center of the room. He closed the distance in seconds, pulling her into a tight embrace. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice thick with emotion. Martha, though shaken, patted his shoulder reassuringly. "I'm fine, David. They didn't lay a hand on me, but I hope they've learned their lesson." David pulled back, his eyes scanning her face for any sign of distress. Her calm demeanor amazed him, but the sight of the broken window behind her reignited his fury. "Nobody messes with you, Grandma," he said, his voice firm. "They'll be locked up before the night's over." As David led her to the kitchen to sit down, Martha allowed herself a small smile. "You raised your voice well out there, David. I'm proud of you." And in that moment, despite the chaos of the night, David realized just how much strength his grandmother had passed on to him. The intruders hadn't just underestimated her. They'd underestimated a legacy of resilience. The next day, the town buzzed with news of the attempted break-in and the culprit's swift capture. David held a press conference, emphasizing the importance of community vigilance and support. "Nobody in this town stands alone," he declared, his gaze firm. The two men, now behind bars, faced charges of attempted burglary and harassment. During their interrogation, they admitted they had no idea their target's grandson was the chief of police. "We didn't think anyone would care," one of them mumbled. David used the incident to reflect on systemic issues. He spearheaded a community outreach program to address crime prevention and support for at-risk youth. "We can't just lock people away and expect change," he said during a town hall. "We need to tackle the root causes." As for Martha, she became something of a local hero. The community rallied around her, ensuring she never felt alone. Though she preferred a quiet life, Martha didn't shy away from sharing her story. "I might be old," she often said with a sly smile, "but I'm not defenseless." The incident strengthened the bond between Martha and David, proving that family and justice go hand in hand. Together, they showed the world that courage and community could overcome even the darkest challenges.